Alright, so I oftentimes don't do this, but I'm gonna do it today. I usually don't respond to
Gedaliah, you probably would have been better off sticking with what you normally do because this is not going to go well for you. First, you start with this assumption for some reason that I am thinking of or only of Genesis 3:15, and that's simply not the case. The Hebrew word zerah appears for women multiple times, in fact, in the Old Testament. But one of those is Genesis 3:15, but let's also look at that and a couple of others. So yeah, we have one of them as Genesis 3:15, and I'm not going to waste time on your exegesis, if we can call it that, of that passage. But let's just look at a couple others. So we've got Genesis 24:60. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants, that is your zerah, that's the Hebrew, your seed, sperma in the Septuagint, may your seed possess the gates of those that hate them." Or Leviticus 22:13. But if a priest's daughter becomes a widow or divorced and has no seed, no child, zerah, sperma, and returns to her father's house as in her youth, she will eat of her father's food, but no layman shall eat of it. So there's multiple texts. Just here we've got three that refer to the seed of women. Genesis 24:60 being the most unambiguous, I think, of them all, possibly. And the problem is you don't fully understand these Hebrew words, zerah and sperma, and for some reason you think they only mean sperm. They don't. Granting it's a little bit small, this is Holliday's Concise Hebrew and Aramaic Lexicon of the Old Testament. Under number 3 there, if you look real closely, offspring, descendants. Absolutely one of the uses. And when we go into the Greek of the New Testament and in the Septuagint as well, it includes the meaning descendants, children, posterity. And so you have to overlook that, which is a little bit odd to me because you seem to think that when Jesus is called the seed of David, that means it's David's sperm. But you don't believe it's actually David's sperm. You think it's Joseph's sperm. So what are you meaning? Do you believe that David was resurrected and came and committed adultery with Mary? No, you don't mean that. What you mean, in fact, is that Jesus is a descendant of David. Now, you talk about how the Holy Spirit impregnating her would be adultery. Well, that's only true if there was actual intercourse that took place, and that is not at all what the Bible teaches. In fact, Luke 1:35 says the Holy Spirit will come upon her, and the power of the Most High will overshadow her, and for that reason, the thing born of her will be called the Son of God. And what we find, though, is that the language of the male component, not in that they had sex and thus committed adultery, but in the providing of the seed to her, does actually come from the Holy Spirit. And this is articulated in Matthew chapter 1, verse 20, where it says, "For the child who has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit." In a Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature, we see here pertaining to Matthew 1:20, it says, "Here the male principle is introduced by ek," which is the Greek preposition meaning out of, from, or by. And so it gives a variety of examples of that. And one of them is the Testament of Simeon. Now, the Testament of Simeon is an ancient Jewish writing from between the 3rd and 1st century BC, before Christ, probably we'll just say the 2nd century to meet in the middle. And in this text, Simeon's talking about his father, and he says, "I was born, conceived, begotten of my father Jacob." So he says this in the Greek. It says, "Ego egenethein ek Ioka." Now, this is exactly the same with the same Greek word genao that is used of the Holy Spirit in Matthew 1:20, where it says, "Tagar enate genethen ek pneumatas esten hagiu." So this born, conceived out of Jacob, born, conceived out of the Holy Spirit. The male principle, as it says, is from the Holy Spirit. It is not from another man. There's no intercourse. This isn't a case like where Zeus came down and took the form of the woman's husband and impregnated her to produce Hercules. That is how that story goes. There's no intercourse involved. There is no adultery involved at all. Yet that male component does come from the Holy Spirit. And this is why Jesus is supposed to be or thought to be Joseph's son. This is what people think. This is the perception. He's the biological son. That's from the outside looking in. That seems to be what's the case. But what is this supposed to be or thought to be from the Greek namizo? What does this actually mean? Well, Thayer's Greek lexicon says to deem, think, suppose. This is what people are thinking. But going into the exegetical dictionary of the New Testament, it says, except in Acts 16:13, where a positive narrative character makes a correct assumption, namizo in Luke Acts always is used of a false assumption, which in some instances is criticized in direct discourse by the opponent and is elsewhere related as an erroneous assumption, like when they thought Jesus was in the caravan returning from the temple, and he was not. The same word is used in Luke 2:44 for exactly that. Now, how we can know they haven't actually slept together, ignoring the fact that she says, I know not a man, ignoring the fact that it says he knew her not until she gave birth to a son. It doesn't say again, it could say ati, the Greek word could be used, palin could be used in the text, both to articulate again, knew her not again because she already had. Neither one of those is there. But they are betrothed. Now, what should happen to consummate that marriage? Well, they should have already consummated it in that they slept together, according to your view. And then we get to verse 24, and it says, and he took Mary as his wife. Now, again, going into the Greek, what is the meaning behind this, according to a Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature? To take her into one's home. Mary started to live with him as his wife. So they've already slept together. They're already living together. They've consummated the marriage. They're living together. That should be it, right? Now they go on. They live together. They go to Bethlehem. Jesus is born. They spend time in Bethlehem. They go to Egypt. They're gone for extended periods between all of this. They're living together as husband and wife. And yet there's a problem for you. When they go to Bethlehem, they're still engaged. They're still betrothed. They've already consummated the marriage according to you. They're already living together. How are they still betrothed? Well, the answer is they never slept together. The word biblical commentary on Luke, John Nolan says the word is probably chosen to suggest that what Matthew expresses quite directly in 1:24 and 25. Mary and Joseph were living together, but had no sexual union prior to the birth of the child. To one already familiar with the tradition of a vaginal conception, the final use egkuo, being pregnant, would provide a cryptic explanation for the fact that Mary and Joseph had formed a family unit, although not really, that is sexually, married. You spent a lot of time taking us to different places, talking about Genesis 3:15, which was entirely irrelevant because we weren't concerned with Genesis 3:15. We're just concerned with Zerah and the fact that women are said to have Zerah, sperm. Not actual sperm, descendants. Women have descendants. Jesus is a descendant of David. God raised up seed for Joseph, just like other men can do, as we see in Genesis 38:9. And so knowing that men can raise up seed for other men, God can certainly raise up seed for Joseph. And that is exactly what he did. Now, for those of you who have watched this, if you found the content interesting, These slides actually come from a presentation I did about 2 weeks ago on YouTube. It was on here and on YouTube, and you can go over there and watch the whole recording of that presentation. I go into a lot more depth, a lot more detail on all of these things, and I think you'll find that really worthwhile.